Welcome to Meet the Author, where you can join in on insightful conversations with best-selling and award-winning indie published authors. Your hosts today are Rob and Joan, who themselves are indie published authors, book publicists, and paranormal investigators with Tampa Bay Spirits, based in Tampa Bay, Florida. Thanks for dropping by. And now, on with the show.
Hello and welcome. I'm Rob.
And I'm Joan. We're glad that you're here tonight. Whether you're watching us live or listening to the podcast later, we really appreciate that you're in our audience.
It's good to have you here for sure. Want to remind everybody
Sorry. Allergies.
Every Thursday night at 9 o'clock Eastern time, we go out on WDJYFM.com. And you can go right to there. You can also, that's 99.1 if you're in the Atlanta area. If not, you can listen on the radio, on the online, www.wdjyfm.com, 9 o'clock every Thursday p.m. Also, Saturdays, episode rewinds on at 5:30 every Saturday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time as well. Next week, I'm not sure who I do know who our guests are going to be. Next Wednesday, 7 o'clock. That's May 8th. Magnolia Bluff Crime Chronicles 2024 Reveal Part 2 with authors Cindy Davis, April Coker, and Joe Conjal are all going to be on with their new entries into the series Magnolia Bluff. And so that's one to not miss. It's going to be interesting. And I want to remind everybody to go over to the series page on Amazon for Magnolia Bluff Crime Chronicles. Pick up your copy of A Chance of a Ghost. That was our entry, book number 23, and it was just released on the 20th. So we hope you enjoy it and review it. We'd like to hear from you. Other than that, do you have anything you would like to talk about?
Nope. Always review all authors' books that you enjoy reading.
Absolutely. We really need that.
And just say why you enjoyed it, what in particular you enjoyed about it, because then other people can find things that they like that.
That's right. Well, we have a very interesting guest tonight, Mr. Guy Robin, and he's joining us from across the pond.
In France.
Hello, Guy.
Good evening. It is evening here.
There it is. Still afternoon here.
Though it will be evening when this airs. So
that's true.
Good evening is appropriate.
There you go. It is.
Thank you.
So good evening, everyone.
Yes. How are you today, Guy?
I'm very well. Thank you very much indeed for the invitation to speak on your program. I very much look forward to getting to know you and having a chat during the course of the program.
Yeah, thank you for saying yes and coming on. So tell us a little bit about your background and when and why you started writing.
Okay. Well, I'm an English-born person. I grew up on the south coast of England, and when I was in my late teens, I made the decision about my career. And at 20, I joined the Metropolitan Police in London. I started at a police station just south of the River Thames, quite central to London. I worked there for the first 8 years of my service. It may not be apparent to your listeners and watchers that British police aren't routinely armed, but my next role involved me becoming a firearms officer when I took up royalty and diplomatic protection duties in Chelsea, which is very close to Buckingham Palace, for those of you who know London at all.
It's a very posh district.
Not bad. It was an interesting time. We had lots of very different people to look after. We looked after, as well as politicians and members of the royal family, we also looked after visiting dignitaries, foreign heads of state that were visiting, and looked after embassy buildings, consulates, and then various other celebrities that required some sort of armed protection because of threats that had been made against them. I did that for about 5 years, and then someone made me an offer I couldn't refuse, insofar as it was a promotional role that took me into a more administrative duty, and we switched to running identification parades. Now, the identification parades that we all see on television, they involve a lineup of real people, and the witness or the victim walks along behind the one-way mirror and points out the person they think committed the crime. We took the technology into the ID parade, and we came up with video identification parades, whereby we'd have a video clip of a suspect, and then we would build a database of volunteers, and then we would match the suspect to a selection of like volunteers until we created a parade of 9 people, the suspect and 8 others. And then we were able to review or onto an MP3 player, and we were able to show that parade to victims and witnesses. But it meant, because I took it onto a laptop, I could travel, and I could travel to where the victim of the crime lived, rather than them having to come into a police station or go somewhere. We brought the service to them. It was quite groundbreaking at the time. This is probably 20 years ago now.
That must have been groundbreaking. And didn't it make the victim feel more comfortable?
Oh, very much so. So when the fear that victims of crime would go through, having to possibly or potentially confront the person who committed, we were removing that fear, because we were saying, well, no, we can come to you. We can, and evidentially it was safeguarded with, we would record the procedure on a separate video camera so that everything was recorded. We would invite the suspect's solicitor to be present, his lawyer to be present, to make sure that we didn't in any way break the rules.
Influence, yeah.
Absolutely. And it was all evidentially
Look
sealed.
at this guy. He did it. This is what he did it.
Don't you think it's that one?
Jack with all the arrows next to his face. Yeah.
What do you think?
So it was quite a groundbreaking thing, and we were able to develop it as the technology got better, and we improved the software, and we were able to provide a lot more identification routes. I think we upped the volume, because it used to take an awfully long time to do an actual proper lineup, because you have to go and find the people to be the volunteers, and that's not easy. You have to pay them each time a sort of a sum of money so that they would stand for a couple of hours waiting for the parade. Whereas with this, once we had our database of volunteers on the computer, we never needed to ask anybody again. They were there. I think by the time I finished, we had something like 22,000 volunteers on the system. It meant the parades were extremely good.
Do you think that the increase in the amount of cameras that are everywhere now, do you think that has helped, or do you think that has hindered?
Well, there are people within the police service and outside who are known as super recognizers, and they are able, through using CCTV stills, they can recognize a suspect from an image that they see. And I think in many ways, video and still photography has improved the ability of detection of a number of different crimes. And I think it's nice to have been involved in some way in bringing a particular small facet of an investigation into a more manageable and useful arena. And we were able to provide and provide many more results than we otherwise would have done. It used to be an investigator's nightmare that, I've got to do an ID parade, and it became quite an onerous thing, whereas we took that and made it a much easier thing to be able to accomplish. And it might often be the only thing that you had as evidence going forward to get that person in front of a judge in court. And so often things would be lost, or it wouldn't be proceeded with, because there was no evidence to justify charging the person and bringing them to a court. This gave us that extra little bit. So it was really interesting. It also meant that as I grew older, I was no longer in the front line of police work. I was kind of, as you might say, what's the phrase? In the rear with the gear, shall we say. And so my 30 years finished in 2016. In the British Police, you did 30 years to receive your full final salary pension. Thank you very much. And at that stage, obviously a crossroads in my life, I just literally turned 50, and it was time to consider, what am I going to do now? What's the next step? My wife was working. We were reasonably comfortably off. It wasn't a necessity for me to go out and get a proper job, but you don't want to be sitting there doing nothing at just turned 50.
Yeah.
So I did a number of different sort of ancillary roles. I worked for a couple of solicitors' offices. Obviously, I had a reasonable ability to take statements from victims of crime, from witnesses, from independent people. So I did some statement taking. I also had a skill with regards to driving. I'd been an advanced police driver, so I was able to pick up quite a few roles with agencies as a professional driver. And it was my last role was driving for one particular client who I had a rapport with, and he offered me a role which was basically working for him full time. And I looked after him and his family. I even drove his car for him from London to Portugal on a couple of occasions, so that he could have the use of his vehicle down in the south of Portugal. So it's a distance of probably about 2,000 miles, I suppose, something of that order. Probably nothing in the United States, but quite a long way as far as I was concerned.
We're kind of big.
Yeah.
He was also a very benevolent boss, insofar as that when the COVID pandemic hit, I was on a retainer, and he continued to look after me all through the restrictions.
That's really nice.
Yeah, he was an incredibly generous, true, and loyal person,
and wealthy.
He really looked after me. And this brings me to how I ended up becoming a writer. There's only so many jigsaw puzzles you can put together. There's only so much Lego you can build, or how many books can you read. You can only do so many refurbishments to your house that you feel comfortable with. And I think it was just one day during the height of the pandemic in the United Kingdom, when we were at the height of our restrictions, and we could only go out for an hour's exercise was the sort of loose rule. I just sat down at my computer and began to write a story. And I'd had a number of different goes at writing a story, writing a book, lots of starts, but never really gone on with it. And this one just kind of took a life of its own. I was able to sort of bring an idea of the actual pandemic and then just push the envelope of where it could have gone had our government been a little bit more draconian and stricter with us, and how people would have responded. And I took a couple of characters and I plucked them out of their comfortable existence and placed them in an environment that was very isolated. I based the story in the Scottish Highlands, on a very small island, where they would have difficulty finding supplies, and they would have to look after themselves very much on their own without any sort of help at all. So as the story continued, I realised that this is now taken on a life of its own, and it's become a really interesting piece. But where do you go from there? I'm lucky enough to have an extremely supportive wife, Paula, and I gave her the story and I said, would you read that? See what you think. And she read through it. She made a few corrections. In fact, she's now my number one proofreader. And she went through it and she said, this isn't bad at all. This really isn't bad. And I then sent it out to a couple of friends, not close friends who I felt would be embarrassed about criticising me, but people that I thought would be true, honest.
Honest feedback,
absolutely. And they again said, yes, this works. Why don't you have a go at seeing if you can find someone to publish it for you? So I did what most new writers do. I went out and put together my query package.
Yeah.
I put together my intro, my letter to the agencies,
my
bio, my little bit of snippet of the manuscript, and I must have sent out, in my case, the first one, probably between 30 and 40 inquiries. And I thought, I don't really know much about the industry, but I will give them 6 months and see where I am. And after 6 months, I'll make a decision about what I do next. You won't be surprised to hear.
No, we won't.
I didn't get anybody pick it up. I had some very polite rejections. I had some extremely well-written rejections, but the majority of them were a sort of corporate, very polite, almost stamped "no, thank you," which is, I suppose, if I'm brutally honest, a little disheartening when you're new into the industry.
Absolutely, no doubt about that.
But
what year was this?
2021, I suppose.
Oh, yeah, 2021. Yeah, publishing had changed so much by then that because when we first started writing, there were 1 million books on Amazon, right? Today, there are over 32 million books. That is how much the industry has changed.
And where would I be without Amazon? But we'll get to that. I think I did have that sort of thought. Well, is it any good? Is the rejection, does that stamp it as not worthy of being published? But people were very supportive. People said, no, don't doubt yourself, guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Why don't you see if you can find an independent publisher?
Exactly.
Now, what I was able to do with the first one. So by the time I got this stage, obviously I've got a title. My first book was called Dysfunction.
Right.
I have this thing about. Thank you. There we are. That's the cover. I've got this thing. I like the idea of a single name, a single word as my title. And I think you'll probably see that as I continue to write, that my fictional work will probably just have one word as its title. I think very carefully about them, but that was what I came up with. Mm-hmm. And I found through a contact at my old school many, many years ago, a former teacher had set up a publishing house. Good. And I spoke to him and I said, is there any way that you would publish an independent author's work? And he said, yeah, provided you're prepared to finance putting it through, then absolutely. For you. So I sort of worked out how much it was going to cost. Mm-hmm. It was prohibitively expensive. I thought it was still worth my effort and worth the chance. And we got together. I found a proofreader and a copy editor to do a professional proofread and copy edit on the piece. They then put it together. I found a cover designer, all of this online. I was very pleased with what the designer came up with. I thought it was just what I was looking for. And there's a sort of an air of menace about it. And you've got the landscape as well. I just like the idea of it. And we then, we thought, well, when can we publish? And we ended up with a date of March of 2022. So it went out as a paperback and it went out as the Kindle edition in March of 2022. I have to say, not have the greatest following on my social media platforms at that stage. I was very new and naive to it all, and something I'm now remedying as we go along. Yeah. And building my confidence and being more comfortable outside my comfort zone, which is where I find myself as I'm doing my marketing and my promotional stuff, because it doesn't sit naturally with me.
Or any new author,
especially a new author.
No,
right.
We have to take our first sponsor break. Okay. After a set of commercials, and when we get back, we'll chat a little bit more about that.
Okay.
Maybe we can talk you into reading a little bit.
I'll be glad to. You
think so? Okay. All right. So don't go away, folks. We got a lot to come yet.
Many secrets are hidden within the darkness of the jungle. Now comes part 4 in the Jaguar series by retired Hollywood scriptwriter George Dismukes. In this saga, Brandon, Andrea, and Naja, the Black Jaguar, go deep into the Mato Grosso jungle on a mission to rescue 2 kidnapped children. During their journey, they encounter many dangers, including Yanomami Indians, bent on revenge for the murder of one of their warriors.
Return of the Jaguar is book 4 in the Jaguar series, starting with 2 faces of the Jaguar, the Lost City, and the Jaguar's Quest. All 4 are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other bookseller websites worldwide. Return of the Jaguar is a must-read.
It's every parent's worst nightmare. Police officer Madison Jackson awakes to discover her baby kidnapped from her crib. Was it revenge for someone she arrested, or something far more sinister? Madison's estranged husband is incarcerated in Supermax. As the second in command of a deadly Mexican cartel, did he issue the order to abduct their daughter? Bye, Baby, Bye, from author Kelly Marshall. Get your copy today.
The clock is ticking. Can Gracie uncover the truth?
Philip Pliant is the wealthy opportunist plastics dealer and CEO of Pliant Industries. He's also a master thief, creating a pervasive threat to the manufacturing infrastructure in the Caribbean islands markets. With the cartel as his stealth client, the naive city leaders have been seduced, enabling the production of more than three-dimensional building materials.
The expected profits are monstrous.
Is the art group, now led by Gracie and the family heirs, strong enough to win against this predator?
Can JJ's cats act on the root cause analysis in time?
Will Gracie be able to squash Pliant and the cartels?
Gracie never considered their lives would hang in the balance. The clock is ticking. 5, 4, 3.
And we're back. For those that are just listening to the podcast, that was from the last commercial was for The Enigma Tracer by Breakfield and Berkey.
And I want to remind everybody, because I know that you forget, this is a pre-recorded visit, so you can go ahead and make comments, but we won't be reading them on the air or answering them right away. Right. So if you have anything for Guy, we'll make sure that he gets your comments so he can respond to you himself.
Right.
And what we were just talking about, I did want to say for any would-be authors that are listening or any new authors, we've had New York Times bestsellers with all the big houses and all the way down to indie published by themselves, not through an indie publishing company, but just indie published. And none of us are comfortable with self-promotion, and none of us are comfortable with marketing. And all of us, including those New York Times bestsellers, have to do marketing. If you don't do the marketing, your book isn't going to be seen.
No one's going to hear about it.
Nobody will know about it. The big publishing houses no longer do for their publishers what they used to do 20 years ago. It doesn't happen anymore.
Just doesn't happen.
So anyway, continue with your story.
Thank you very much. So once Dysfunction was out and I was now the proud feeling of being a published author,
yes,
there was a degree of pride. I was delighted. It felt very, very, very satisfying.
Yes.
Obviously, you very quickly come to terms with the fact that you're not going to be a Sunday Times bestseller or New York bestseller. You might be lucky in a month to sell 3 or 4 books, and you very quickly adjust to that fact. But it doesn't dissuade, or it certainly didn't dissuade me. It was the fact that I'd really enjoyed the writing.
Exactly.
I found it so cathartic, so good for my mental health, and keeping my brain active as I get older. And it was the enjoyment of learning new words to use, of expanding my vocabulary, of coming up with stories that were perhaps maybe original, but just with developing a style that I hoped would be of my own. As I've said, the marketing side of it for the first book was a struggle. And as I've moved forward, as I'm moving forward now, yes, it's not natural, but it's starting to become a little bit easier. And I feel slightly more comfortable as I sit here talking to you today. So whilst Dysfunction was out there, rather than sit back and think that was great, I immediately embarked on the next project and sort of pretty much started writing it in the summer of 2022. It was a completely different genre. I was intent on writing a historical fiction, and the basis of the story was my German grandfather. So there's an awful lot of truth in this story that I've just put out. My next book obviously is Indomitable, and thank you very much. And Carl, the main character, is my grandfather, and he came in reality, he came to the United Kingdom from Germany in 1890 as a small boy.
Okay.
And then I took his life and I embellished and used a fair amount of artistic license to create the story. There were pivotal events in his life that I knew existed, that were fact. I had to just build some of the, flesh it out in my own way with the bones of what I knew about his life. I spent time at our National Archives in outer London and spent time finding the records about him and what he'd been up to. The fact that as a German, when the First World War broke out in 1914, the British government took 70,000 Germans and imprisoned them for the duration of the war, including my grandfather. And I think it's a piece of history that not many people realise.
No, I don't. I love history, but as an American, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
I knew what we had done to people.
Yeah, what our country
but
did. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay, I have a question to ask, and I don't mean to have any disrespect for your country at all, but isn't your royal family of German origin? I thought they were a German family.
Absolutely. And at
I
the
mean,
time,
we still have uncles and cousins and what have you in Germany.
Well, Queen Victoria's nephew was the Kaiser who ran Germany.
Exactly.
And her other cousin was the Tsar of Russia. So Queen Victoria was pretty much the patriarch of the entire European royalty at that time. They were all interrelated, and they, as you quite rightly say, she was married to a German. Prince Albert was a German. So it's an ironic state of affairs.
Charles' uncle was a German, if I remember correctly.
So you've got, the Earl
Prince
Mountbatten.
Philip, I think, felt more German than he did English, did he not?
Yes, and his father was, but they were all. It was a very interesting story. And I think when I was researching, I was really keen to see if I could introduce real characters, real people into the fictional narrative, and that's what I've woven into the story, is that real events with real people. And my grandfather Carl is there, and I've pushed him into all these different
It's
places.
fascinating. I know what I feel about conscription here in the United States. I think it was terrible. I think it was awful. Terrible that we did that to Americans. I mean, they were Americans. I don't care where they originated,
Absolutely right. The reality of my grandfather's situation was that, having lived in the country, it took him 35 years to become a British subject. It wasn't until the mid-1930s that he got his certificate of citizenship.
Wow.
When he was taken to the internment camp, which they put on the Isle of Man, which is an island between Ireland and United Kingdom and England.
Yeah.
He was married to a British girl at that time, a British lady, and she gave birth to his son a month before he was taken.
Was that your father?
No, would have been my aunt. My grandfather, in reality, led an incredibly interesting life, and his second wife, who was 20 years his junior, was my grandmother, and they had a son.
Oh, okay.
So my father was their son, and I think my grandfather was in his mid-40s when my dad was born. So it's all wrapped up in the story. I've changed
fascinating most
of the names, but it deals with a period in history starting at the turn of the 20th century, going right up to about 1955-56 is when it ends.
That's amazing. I have another question. This is making me think, just because of the way you were speaking about your first book, which was, as we said, was dysfunction. Okay, yes. Which, your brain started working with the COVID lockdown and everything. But Indomitable was really more with very real situations in your own life. But I could tell from the way that you were speaking that your characters are real. They're real people. They make their own decisions. Your characters go where they want to go when you intended them to go one way and they go another. But in Indomitable, some of them really were based on very real people. But did they still become, how do I say this, real to you? Did they become your characters that were very real to you, that you were connected to? You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And I think, yes, that is, it would be correct to say that. But I never had an opportunity to know my grandfather. He died, sadly, when I was only, I think, 2 or 3 years of age. And my elder brother knew him because he was some years older than me. And he said he was an incredibly rich and interesting person to talk to, and his life. And most of what is, to all intents and purposes, yes, it's a fictional account, but the bones of what happens in the story is true. And I've got the National Archives sort of records to prove that what some of the things that happen in here did actually happen. You just have to work out, well, he may well have been at that particular juncture. He may well have been in that situation. And to make the narrative work, and then to do the research and to sort of feed in moments in history that perhaps people don't know as well as they might, and then be able to inject fictional characters into real events. I found it really great fun. I found it really rewarding and satisfying. And I really did get an awful lot of pleasure from putting a story together and moving it along every time. It will make people laugh. It will make people cry. I've had people read it and I've had reviewers say, you made me cry, because there is heartbreak. You can't have a story called Indomitable without there being some adversity going through it. And it's a page turner, but it's also a tearjerker. There's romance, there's action, there's fighting to struggle to survive and succeed in life. And it's one man's determination to come through the other side, no matter what's been thrown at him in the whole of his life.
Would you like to give a shout out to the people that do your covers?
So yes, I found my designer. He's a chap called Stephen Mead, and you can find him online. Or if people want to contact me, I'd be happy to give Steve a shout out and give you his details. He does and designs covers. All you need to give him is an idea of what's in your head, and he comes up with these.
It looks like in both of them, well, at least in Indomitable, it looks like there was some creative artistry as well.
Yeah.
Is he an artist too?
Yes, he is. We wanted the eyes looking back at the person reading the book, and we wanted the ships in shadow. And I had to get him to change the two ships so that they were First World War ships. Well, rather than the original ships looked a bit too modern, like something like the USS Enterprise or something. I said, no, they've got to be old ships. They've got to be old dreadnoughts.
Those do look old.
Yeah.
Well, let me show people where they can reach you, since we're speaking about that.
Thank you.
Right. So on Facebook, you can reach Guy at Guy Robin Author, and those words are separated. I want to say Guy Robin Author. And for you of those that are listening, that's GUY ROBIN AUTHOR, capitals on all three words. You can find them on LinkedIn under Guy separated Robin, same spelling. You know, did LinkedIn add 5,000 numbers behind your name too? No. If they did, just look for Guy Robin.
Guy Robin, you'll find him. He's easy to find. Yeah.
And then on X, formerly known as Twitter, you can find him at little @ Guy Robin _author, and those are all words smushed together except for the underscore and no capital letters. Okay, so that's where you can reach him. And I'm sure he would love to hear from you. Follow him on Facebook, follow him on LinkedIn, and follow him on X.
So that brings us to, you wanted to share a little reading from short passage from one of your books.
Indomitable.
I basically decided to go for Indomitable.
Okay.
And we go straight into the action. This is set. Well, you try and work out where it's set as I read the story. Take the Gestapo car, Otto said, as he waved some keys in the air and hustled the group over to the black sedan parked almost opposite Ziggy's house. Otto didn't see another car hidden in the shadows. Somehow they all clambered into the sedan, and Otto started the engine and moved off down the street. As he made a turn onto the more major road, Ziggy exclaimed, "Bloody hell, there's a police van! Floor it, Otto!" Freya, sitting on Carl's lap, saw people inside the van as she looked through the rear window. "Go, Otto, there are police inside," she said tensely. Otto accelerated the sedan, and it screeched around the corner and away. Within 10 seconds or so, the other Gestapo car appeared, and the driver leant out of its open window and bellowed, "Follow us! They've stolen that car and are all fugitives." He then roared away in the same direction as the first car. The police van rumbled out of its parked position and followed. "Headlights behind," Petra said as she looked out of the rear window of the car. "Faster, Otto," Ziggy encouraged his great friend and mentor. "How far to this place where there are boats?" Carl asked Ziggy. "It's about 8 to 10 miles, I believe. We should be there in 10 to 15 minutes, or sooner if Otto could drive this car a little bit faster." Ziggy looked across at the furrowed brow of his friend, now wrestling with the steering wheel as they negotiated a tight right-hand bend. Otto fought to control the vehicle as he pressed his right foot further down on the accelerator pedal. "The lights are further away, but still coming, and I think I can see a second set now," Freya shouted. "Everybody keep calm," Otto ordered. "Another 5 minutes and I can turn into one of the side roads that takes us to the coast. See if we can spot anything we can use to get across the lake." As they approached another sharp bend, Otto slowed and took a side road towards a small habitation called Eriskirch. "I think I can find a back way down to the small harbour at Langenargen," he explained as he roared down the empty smaller road through some streets full of houses and then out into another area of trees and farmland. Otto had also turned off the lights as he used the night sky to vaguely give him some visibility. Very soon they were among the outskirts of another suburban sprawl of houses. Otto continued at a good pace, negotiating the various back streets as they drove further into the town. "This is Langenargen," and that's where I'll stop the clip.
Excellent.
Very
That
good.
was very good. Makes you really want to read the book.
Yeah.
God bless your grandfather and grandmother,
Right.
both the grandmothers.
So yes, my one of the beauties of having written this was that I got involved with some ancestry sites to try and dig out my family tree and work out some history beyond my grandfather and his parents and go back. And during the course of that, I was lucky enough to discover relatives in the United Kingdom that I never knew I had.
Amazing.
So the power of our modern technology and modern communication, I was lucky enough to find relatives to Carl's younger brother. He had two brothers. He had an elder brother called Max, and he had a younger brother called Willie. And Willie's descendants are the people that I've now reconnected with.
Did they all immigrate? The three brothers?
So Carl came across to the United Kingdom with his family. So his parents, Albert and Charlotte, they brought them over, the three boys, as children. And they settled in a part of the United Kingdom called Leicester, which is sort of in the Midlands of the United Kingdom. And Albert, when he'd left Germany, they came from an area close to a town in Germany called Leipzig, which is sort of the east of Germany. And he was an upholsterer, that was his trade. And he ended up getting a job in the textile industry, which is what Leicester is famous for in the United Kingdom. And his eldest son, Max, he also worked in the textile industry. Willie would have still been at school. And Carl, my grandfather, he ended up as a commercial traveller, commercial salesman initially, working for a variety of companies before becoming quite a wealthy machine tool distributor, mainly of German machine tools and milling because he had the German connections at that time. But this is all after the formative years which you can read about in the story.
Excellent.
There you go.
Excellent.
We need to take our last break. When we come back, we'll talk about what you got coming up in the very near future, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Don't go away, folks. Stand by.
Step into the captivating world of skullduggery, where a family of isolated peasant copyholders finds themselves thrust into a web of danger that threatens their very existence. Set against the tumultuous backdrop of the English Reformation, this meticulously researched historical mystery unfolds with a cast of both lovable and despicable characters, immersing you in a fully realized world that's both utterly believable and fantastically unbelievable. Author Paul Rushworth Brown weaves a spellbinding narrative that transports you to Yorkshire, England, in the 16th and 17th centuries, offering an authentic and gritty portrayal of peasant life. The pages come alive with vivid descriptions, crafting an atmosphere that pulls you deeper into a story of crime, murder, and suspense like no other.
Hi, I'm Paul Rushworth Brown, author of Skullduggery, Red Winter Journey, and Dream Courage, just recently released. I hope you enjoy Skullduggery, the second edition. Cheers.
It's 1919, and Eric Laska returns from the war in Europe. Two new enemies await him in the small coal mining town he calls home. One is a threat to his relationship with Rebecca, the love of his life. The other, a bloodthirsty beast, is stalking the mining town residents. The townspeople suspect Eric of one of the killings. An old man and Rebecca's 11-year-old sister have seen the beast, but only Eric believes their story. To protect the town and clear his name, he's forced to prove the werewolf exists. Available on Amazon. The Hoary Swift Doring.
Paradise, my prison. Charlie Flint awakens from a deep sleep and finds himself alone on a tropical beach surrounded by a palm tree jungle and exotic animals. He cannot remember who he is or anything about his life. First, he must find food and build shelter and protect himself from hidden dangers. As his memory gradually returns, it reveals what a very flawed person he is. A man who made too many mistakes, made too many enemies. The implications of the truth are staggering. How did Charlie get there? And will he save himself? Paradise, My Prison is the riveting new suspense thriller from retired Hollywood scriptwriter George Dismukes. Paradise, My Prison by George Dismukes is available in jacketed hardcover, softcover, and all ebook formats worldwide.
And we're back again
with Guy.
Hello, still here?
Yeah, this is very interesting. I have to say, I do have one question. Oh, wait a minute. I want to remind everyone again, this is a pre-recording. Mm-hmm. And if you're making comments, there's a reason we're not putting it up on the screen. It's pre-recorded, not live, even though you're watching it live. But go ahead and make the comments and we will try and answer all of those. And if there's anything particular to Guy, we'll try and get him to answer that. I had a question that I know that many of our audience always want to know. And I'll see if you're familiar with what I'm talking about. Are you a pantser or a plotter? And do you know what those words mean?
I'm not convinced.
No. A plotter is someone who outlines their book and their chapters and knows exactly what they're going to write about. They follow the outline. A pantser is someone who flies by the seat of their pants and just starts writing and writes the book and, continues to go through and correct and adjust along
the latter, a pantser.
Pantser, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most of our audience are pantsers. Most of us are like hybrids. We kind of have an idea where we're going. We're not sure how we're going to
Every once in a while, you have to go back and put an anchor down and say, okay, here's where I am. And okay, yeah, I do still want to go that way. And, this is the end, follow the arc or whatever, so every once in a while you have to do that. I think everybody does.
Yeah. But, yeah. The last book we just finished, as a matter of fact, is about 20,000 words shorter than we had planned on it being, because we came to a point where it ended and Rob turned to me and said, I think that's the end. We don't want to continue from there. We have to leave there. And he was right.
It's a high point. It's an emotional point.
A very emotional point.
And a significant point in the whole story. So it's like, let's stop while we're ahead. Let's stop there because that's a good place to stop.
And then tied up the loose ends with an epilogue, which is what we did.
Yeah.
But
I can see, I think depending on what I'm writing, I pitch myself as a multi-genre author because I've written a dystopian fiction and I've written a historical fiction. Obviously, I know what I'm going to write next.
Is it dystopian?
No. I'm going to go for a true account, sort of biography.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which
you said you've already gotten it written, right? I mean, pretty much.
Yeah, basically, it's to all intents and purposes, it's complete, and it's just now going through the production stages.
We don't have to wait too long then. Right.
Well, I'd like to get it out this year, and I think we can think maybe towards the end of the summer. I think it will be ready to go.
Cool.
Now is the formatting, editing, rewriting.
I'm going back through it line by line.
And there's also
line by line editing
because it is to do with my formative years in the police force in London. The anecdotes that go with it. Every so often, I get a light bulb and go, and there's that one. I've had that.
Right. Because you tend to forget until you're immersed in that time period again, right?
Absolutely. I was out having dinner last night with my wife, and we were sat chatting about stories and some of the anecdotes that I have written. And then I told her other stories, and she said, "Are they in the book?" I went, "No." She goes, "Oh, really? They should be in the book. They're brilliant." So
good.
Obviously, I've note to self straight away in the phone. Don't forget that story about the full moon. Don't forget that story about the Gorbachev incident and all things like that.
There's a full moon story, huh?
Oh yeah, there's a full moon.
You know
there's a
what we
Gorbachev
say here
story.
in the States, right? All of the first responders, those in the hospital and those in the fire department and the police department, all hell breaks loose when there's a full moon.
Which kind of brings me to a question I had, actually, and that is on your other two books, your first two books, does any of your police background, how did that factor into either one of those two books? Did you have to draw from that at all?
So I was able to use the knowledge of firearms I have in the first book because there is a degree of weaponry that's involved in the story. So I've got the knowledge of how to use firearms. I've got the knowledge of how to make them safe, how to fire, how to operate, and how you would look after munitions. It's not something that's as common in the United Kingdom as it is in the United States. And an awful lot of people in the UK have no clue about firearms.
Right.
I'm fortunate enough to obviously have a ready understanding of the majority. And I cheated. I made sure the weapons that my characters had were weapons that I'd actually used myself. I could talk more knowledgeably about them because that was what I used on a daily basis or carried on a daily basis.
Now, wasn't it kind of difficult when you were on your first period of duty there down by the Thames on the south end?
Not having a firearm.
Not having a firearm. Wasn't that a little intimidating?
Because criminals are going to have firearms.
Not so much in the United Kingdom, not in those days. So we're talking the mid-1980s, and I walked out after my training, and I walked out after my 10-week street duties course. So my first day as a fully fledged London Beat Bobby in my very smart tunic with a hat that you all know and love from the tourist film.
The helmet, yeah.
The helmet, yeah. Armed with my wooden truncheon down the back of the trouser leg, and a whistle and a notebook and a radio, and that was about it. A pair of handcuffs, and that was about it. And you just trust yourself to even we tended to patrol on foot alone. It was very rare to patrol in pairs.
Wow.
It was just you. So anything you could come across, you would just find yourself maybe the first on scene dealing with whatever it was. And I think the beauty of what comes across when I get this book out is the sheer variety, and every day something different would happen. And it was
a boring job.
Not a 9 to 5 Another day at the office, darling. It was very different, very different.
Right.
What I did, this all came about. I started writing poems about these anecdotes, and I created these poems, and I'd created 20 poems.
Wow.
And I thought, what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to put the poems out, and then after each poem, I'm going to write some notes, and then the notes became the narrative. So it was almost like the poems are a way into the story, and then afterwards the notes talk about the poem, but they also expand upon what the poem's talking about. So if I say, for example, the first poem was about a group of officers who worked together in London on the same shift, was called a relief of officers. So my first poem was called The Relief, and it was this amalgam of all these different aged coppers, all these bobbies, being looked after by a sergeant and an inspector, who all wore the same uniform and went out. Probably in the area I worked, maybe between 30 and 40 of us, covering that particular part of London. Probably a couple of 3 or 4 square miles, not much more than that. And another poem was called Early Turn, which is all about our early shifts, starting at 6 a.m. until 2 p.m. And then Late Turn, which was from 2 o'clock until 10 o'clock in the evening. And then obviously night duty from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. And just going through that, and I had poems about some of the things that I dealt with, things like the Notting Hill Carnival, some of the disruptions and the protests that we dealt with at that time, the disputes that we had in London and beyond at that time. I'm talking about a London where we were still getting bombed by the IRA in the 80s. That was that degree of terrorism that was going on. We were having an awful lot of serious incidents happening. We had a massive railway crash on my patch in the late 80s at Clapham, the Clapham rail crash. There was all sorts of things going on. It was a really, really interesting time to be a police officer.
Yeah.
And it deals with probably about the first, as I said, the first 8 to 9 years of my service before I moved on to other things.
Yeah.
I go from being a rookie beat duty cop, very wet behind the ears, only 20, 21 years of age when I started patrolling, and leaving as a sort of world-weary 30-something, moving on to the next stage of my police career. It's insightful. It's very funny. It's got some quite dark humour, but it's also quite thought-provoking, soul-searching. Some of it's harrowing to read, but it's truthful. It's honest. It's just an account, and I'm very proud of it. I'm looking forward to getting it into print because I think it will say something to an awful lot of people at a time in the United Kingdom where today the police are under such scrutiny, not necessarily for the right reasons. And I like to see that. I would love to see people return to perhaps the way things were in my formative years, but I feel unfortunately the genie's out of the bottle and we've moved on as a society.
I think so too. Actually, hold on just for a minute. Don't anybody go anywhere. But we do have to tell our Atlanta viewers that we're going to say goodbye to them.
Good night, Atlanta.
Good night, Atlanta. The rest of us keep listening. So Rob and I are of Irish descent. Okay. And my family kept all the letters from our family in Ireland through the years. My grandfather brought us up saying that if you had more than, I forget how much sterling in your pocket, you weren't Irish, you were British. Yeah.
2 pounds or something.
Yeah. And I remember my parents went to visit London, and they were there when the Tower of London was bombed by the IRA. And my parents had just visited there. And my father comes home and says, wouldn't that have been funny if we had died, if the Irish had killed their own? And we said, no, it wouldn't have been funny. Those are terrorists. And we used to have these arguments with my father all the time that the IRA was not fighting for freedom. They were terrorists, you know. That is so difficult a conversation to have. And it's easy for him to say, because he's living in the United States, you know, he wasn't living in, you know.
We just felt, I think at that time, we were going from one sort of attempted bombing to a failed bombing to another situation. And they were just literally, it felt like on every day you were creating these cordons. And
one was on the bridge, I remember.
Yeah, there was one at Harrods department store. There was a bomb there.
Yes.
We had one in Hyde Park, one at Chelsea Barracks, one in the city at Bishopsgate, which was an enormous bomb. And then one of the last ones that I recall was at South Quay, which is another part of London. And they were all just terrifying events to be anything close to involved with. Because you just didn't know if they had maybe a secondary device somewhere. That was a tactic that was starting to be employed, that you'd be somewhere and they would wait for the rendezvous point and they'd have a bomb where they thought your rendezvous point would be, to see if they could kill a few more of you indiscriminately. So it was an interesting time to be in the service, I have to say.
A harrowing time, I would think, you know?
Yeah, I think as a consequence, we became very close as a unit of officers. We bonded to a degree that I don't think in the rest of my service I ever replicated. That bond of friends that I made and those connections I made in those 9 years, I'm still friends with all of them now, 30 odd years later. And we have lots of reunions, and because we had each other's backs, and there's that camaraderie, you never lose that. And it's the same with military veterans. If you've served, you know what you're talking about. And I'm sure that's exactly the same in the American situation.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say it's just like being at war. But, I think that a lot of, there's more Americans of Irish descent than there are Irish in Ireland, as a matter of fact. And so I don't know how many people had as recent an immigration as my family did. Okay. So probably a lot of them feel very disconnected from that. But like I said, it was a very real thing for my dad. And I'm 77. So, he's passed a long time ago. And I can remember the family arguments of the adult children saying to our adult father, these are not freedom fighters. They are not doing this righteous, noble thing. They're terrorists. And what they're doing is terrible, and you can't give money to it. Mm. You're giving money to a terrorist organization, I don't know. I know it was very upsetting for us to have our father thinking like that, when we could easily see that it was terrorism, and that terrorism in any name is terrorism. It's no good. But for you to have been in the middle of that on the other side, you can certainly see that it wasn't noble. It was sneaky, and
and
innocent people were being targeted.
Yeah, innocent people. It's terrible.
Yeah, terrible.
Definitely. There we are.
Yeah. Tourists like my parents could have been killed in that. Haha, wouldn't that have been funny? No, Dad, it wouldn't have been. It would have been horrible.
So you've got this one completed. And what else is spinning around up there?
Two projects on the go at the moment. I've got a journal that I'm writing about my time living in France. We moved here in July of last year. Okay. So when I've been here a year, I'll have a year's journal. So there'll be a year of stories about our sort of up sticks and leaving the United Kingdom and coming to live in France permanently.
Have you found that to be a difficult transition?
Clerically speaking and administratively, yes. Since the United Kingdom pulled out of the EU and since Brexit, it's been more complicated.
I bet.
But not insurmountable. It's just we've had to jump through a few more hoops. But if we dealt with it, my wife's really sort of practical, and we dealt with it in a proper proper way. We did it properly. We've got our visas and we renew them every year for the first 5 years we're here, and then we can apply for residency, and then hopefully it becomes even easier. So that's an idea for a story. Again, a biography of our first year here, and it would be remiss of me not, as an ex-police officer, not to have a crime drama up my sleeve.
Yay!
All right.
So I'm really enjoying the research that I'm doing on a sort of character-based crime drama, which I'm hoping will come to something. I'm just literally sketching out characters at the moment, and I'm trying to make them believable. And it'll be gritty and it'll be pretty brutal, but it'll be realistic. It has to be
set in the UK, maybe.
Sorry.
Will it be set in the UK?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Okay.
We might be dealing with gendarmes and not bobbies.
Well, possibly. I mean, I have characters in my book Indomitable that come to the United States and settle. There are characters that come in. There's a character that's in New York, and there's a characters that end up on the West Coast. So
that's interesting, because the number one people that have settled here in the United States have German descent.
Wow. There we are.
Number one is German. Number two is, of course, Irish.
Well, I know that's part of the fact, you see, that I know Carl and Max, when they were interned, had applied to the United States to come and emigrate to the United States from England. And the United States Secretary of State gave them leave to do that, but the British authorities blocked it. And it's all written down in the archives.
Isn't that interesting?
You're going to prison, you're not going to the States. And how different.
Wow.
Oh, it existed. My grandfather and his elder brother would have moved to the States, and they'd have started in the States.
Yeah, just let me go.
Wow.
Why
Isn't
not?
that, but then you would have been an American.
Yeah.
And you would have had a firearm from the beginning.
Possibly. And I think what you have to understand about that time is that the Germans had just sunk the Lusitania, the civilian liner, and a lot of Americans were on board. In fact, I think it's what brought America into the First World War, the casualties that this atrocity had been committed by the Germans. And therefore, the feeling towards Germans, even by Americans, wasn't as positive as it might have been. And the British government's attitude was, no, you're staying here. You're going nowhere.
Right.
And they became quite... in fact, the British public took against Germans, and a lot of them were interned for their own safety, because virtually every German shop in England had its windows put in, and there were riots, and people were literally going to be lynched if they hadn't been swept up and put somewhere.
Oh.
The feeling was running high, and this is back in 1915.
Right.
So we're talking, a long time ago. But it's all to be read and enjoyed in Indomitable.
My maternal grandfather fought in World War One.
Okay.
But he was where you are. He was in France.
Okay.
Which he enjoyed. It was after he'd fought in the Haitian War, the Banana Wars.
Okay.
Set in Haiti. He was there first, and then in World War One.
Yeah.
He came home with shrapnel that they never were able to take out. So yeah.
Wow.
I know. It's a small world. And so now you're living in France, which I think a lot of us would think that was the epitome of a place to retire. If you're going to retire someplace in France. I mean, come on, it's beautiful.
We have the opportunity. When sometimes everything lines up in the right way, that the timing was right, our situation, both my wife and my situations were right, and we thought, we can do this.
Yeah.
There's nothing stopping us. And we are quite dogmatic people. We will go after something. We don't sit around thinking about it. Just do it. And, and we've, here we are 8 months later. We feel like we've settled in. The house needs a fair bit of work doing to it, but we'll get around to that. The garden needs an awful lot of work doing, but again, we'll enjoy that as the weather starts to improve from now. And we've got the whole of Europe to explore. So
yeah,
that's
is
true.
the Eurorail system still as good as it used to be?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I can get to Paris in 2 hours on one of their trains from here. And we live,
Excellent.
400 miles away. So, 200 mile per hour train. It's incredible. We're about an hour from the city of Bordeaux, where I live.
Wonderful.
So that's
So
over eastern side or southern?
Yeah, we're about an hour inland from the west coast,
Okay.
the Atlantic coast of France, where Bordeaux is.
Okay.
Big red wine country.
Yeah. Nice.
Which is a shame, obviously.
Yeah. So have you learned French? Are you going to learn French, or did you already know French? You're learning
it. We do try and do a little bit of French every day. We've met some people and become friendly with a group of people that like walking in the hills and the valleys, and we've gone and joined them. So we're forcing ourselves to speak French. We don't live in a particularly English part of France.
Right.
We are very much in a French village,
Right.
and it forces you.
Yes.
As much as you can learn, online and things like that, the best way of learning is speaking to people or trying to understand them as they speak to you and converse. And so getting a plumber to come in and deal with the house, and an electrician and someone to do jobs around the house, you have to understand them and get a vocabulary together in French so that you can get these jobs done.
Exactly.
So it helps, and I'm confident that I don't think we'll ever be fluent, but I think we will.
You might be surprised.
We'll see. I mean, it's early days, and we feel where we've come in 8 months is pretty good.
Yeah.
We'll see where we are.
I lived in Mexico for 3 years. And so, I was just thrown in there, and I had never, of course, I took French in school and moved to Mexico.
And I took Spanish in school and went to France.
Okay.
So
there we are.
It's really weird.
Well prepared, right?
Yes.
But I did learn in 6 months. I could understand everything that was being said to me. I just couldn't speak it back, right?
Yeah, I experienced a lot of that.
You do that. And then after another 6 months, then I could speak to all of them. Though all of my friends said to me, hablas como ranchera, which was not a compliment. And they meant I was speaking like I had which is, don't think anything highfalutin or frou-frou-y. Everyone had a maid there and a gardener, and I had live-in maid and gardener. And so I spoke like them. And of course, they came from out in the country. So it was like saying I was talking like a country bumpkin, because they were the people that I spoke with all the time, because they didn't speak any English. And a lot of my other friends wanted to practice their English, and I wanted to practice my Spanish. So, but within a year, I was very fluent. And within a year and a half, I was dreaming in Spanish. I was no longer dreaming in English. And after 3 years, I literally was forgetting how to say some words in English, because by then I was totally immersed in all of my Mexican friends spoke Spanich to me all the time. So,
one of the things we notice is we make the effort to speak in French to a certain shop, or we go in to buy something, and we embark on trying to speak, albeit we're making mistakes, but we are trying to speak French.
Grocery stores were my best place. Well, there weren't really that many grocery stores. There were markets, and there were some.
Do much better. We do much better with people if we make the effort. They appreciate the fact that you're trying.
Oh, and they'll help you.
Yeah, they do help you, and I think we've been so lucky. Our neighbours have welcomed us. We have a little bit of friendly rivalry with the French. Anyway, it's an old, long-standing thing.
For sure, it is.
With English and French, it's friendly banter, I suppose you would say.
Yeah. That's just really. I just think you're going to have so much fun, and I believe you'll be fluent. I ended up getting a job there. I was working as a missionary with some Indians, some natives, indigenous people, the Huicholes, up in the mountains. But then I had a job down in Guadalajara that actually paid money, and which was a good thing. And I taught English in Berlitz, which you have to be a native speaker to teach in Berlitz. So we had a French teacher, Jackie, who was from Paris, who didn't speak English. She only spoke a little Spanish and mostly French. So our conversations were really interesting because I spoke a little French and a little Spanish. So it was a good place to work as far as learning languages. We had a Russian from Russia who was teaching Russian, and, you know, a Swedish woman was there teaching Swedish, and believe it or not, a Puerto Rican was there teaching English.
Okay.
Which is funny to us here in the States, because in Puerto Rico they speak Spanish. Though they're part of the United States, they speak Spanish.
When I was in France, I was in Paris. It was shortly after graduating. It was the summer I graduated from high school, so I was pretty young. I was on with a group, and I went for a walk by myself, and I was in Paris and went off on these side streets and didn't speak oui, you know, okay. You can say oui all the way home and nobody's going to know what you're talking about. But anyway, I went I was hungry, so I went into this bakery that looked pretty cool. And I went in there, and I suddenly felt very alone because not a soul in there spoke English. And that's a very scary thing, you know, especially when you're young and, you know, you're used to everybody knowing what you're talking about. So I tried to order something, and it wound up being a lot of pointing and yes, yeah, that, yeah. How much money? I don't know, you know, all that stuff. So, but the people were very kind and very understanding, like you said. Very helpful. I finally got what I wanted, which was good, but it was like,
if you're trying, people appreciate that.
Yeah, they do. And they were very, very accommodating and very nice, but it's a scary place to be if you don't know how to communicate.
Sure,
you know?
Definitely.
So anyway.
I remember going to buy eggs, and people don't actually call them eggs in Mexico. They call them little whiteys, blanquillos. And so I would ask for that, which has another connotation that has nothing to do with eggs, which caused a lot of laughter and a lot of embarrassment for me being a young woman. So they were kind enough to tell me, don't say that, say blanquillos. I was like, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the heads up.
Never said that again. And called them little whiteys from then on. But, you know, you'll find colloquialisms like that where things, that's not the way we say it. Maybe if you learn Spanish out of a book or online, you would say it that way. But in reality, we say it this way. So it's just really fun. You're at a really fun place. I mean, it's exciting.
Very exciting.
I know. I think it's very exciting.
It's like having a new life. You know?
It's an adventure.
It is.
Right?
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. And in a beautiful place to have an adventure. I've got to say.
It's been very stimulating for my writing. I find myself energized, motivated, and there's new stuff coming into my head thinking, yeah, I'm ready to go to the next one now. And it's just opened up a whole avenue of ideas for me. It's been great.
Cool.
And from what you were saying about writing the poems and stuff, I think you've been wanting to write for a long time before you actually, maybe without ever formulating it in your head that you could, you know, actually sit down and do that. But I think that's been in there for a really long time.
And that's really an interesting format. I like
it is. Writing the poems and then going to the narrative.
And then going to the narrative. Yeah.
Right.
That's really cool.
Because the poems are going to be all feeling.
I've seen that done before, but it's very rare, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought I can't just put the poems down in isolation. They need, because there's colloquialisms and there's jargon, I thought I've got to give the reader something to cling on to so they've got an idea. And then there's so many anecdotes that I thought I could throw in that would add a bit more light and a bit more interest to the piece and add humour and melancholy and angst. And I just thought, yeah, this is going to work. And, well, it remains to be seen if it does work, but I hope it does.
I'm sure it does.
Sounds like it would.
Yeah.
Sounds like it would.
Yeah. I like the reading that you did. And
yeah.
It's interesting. You are multi-genre for real.
Thank you very much.
That's good.
That's a good thing. Yeah. It's awesome.
Anything else you'd like to add, or?
No, I think I'm really appreciative of the opportunity that you've given me. I have an opportunity to thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to speak to people on the other side of the pond. I don't get an opportunity to do that. I apologise for my accent if it's difficult to understand me.
Oh,
not at all.
Not a bit.
I look at my returns and my figures, and the way things are going as we speak, 2 weeks after publication of Indomitable, 20% of my sales are in the United States. So
yeah, that's awesome.
People are obviously
maybe it'll go up a little bit more now.
Yeah, hopefully this will give you a little
boost. Hopefully,
it's an audience, and I've been to the States I think 3 times in my life, and I've only scratched the surface. And I go back. We went to New England for our honeymoon.
Awesome. That's where I'm from, Massachusetts.
So we went to Niagara Falls because that's what tourists do.
There you go.
It's beautiful.
We went there not too long ago.
Yeah.
And we drove right across the state to Cape Cod and had a look at Cape Cod. And we spent some time in Boston.
Yeah.
We didn't get to see a baseball game, but we did do the tour of Fenway Park. But unfortunately, there wasn't a game on that we could get to see. Then we went down to Washington.
Nice.
We wanted to spend some time in the capital to see some of the sites of Washington. And again, I could have spent the whole of my honeymoon in the Smithsonian.
Isn't it? We used to live. Amazing. We lived there in Washington. He was in Washington D.C. for a while. He was there, and I mean, really, I could have spent more than 3 years in the Smithsonian. I love it. It's amazing.
And we finished our honeymoon in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh,
okay.
So we had.
Well, we lived in Miami for a while too.
Yeah.
We're in Tampa Bay now, though.
Yeah, it was the last week, and we wanted some proper sunshine.
Sunshine. And did it rain, or was there sunshine?
Yeah, of course it rained.
Yeah, it's Florida. It's going to rain in the afternoon.
It was fine. It was a lovely trip, and then we flew back home from Miami at the end of the trip. It was a real sort of bounce around, sort of 4-week honeymoon. Really enjoyable.
Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. Nice. And that's your whole time you were in the States? You said 3 times?
Yeah, I came back again. How many years ago now? Again, only Florida, because we took our nephews to
Disney World.
Yeah,
Disney World.
Disney World. Apologies. We did the whole Universal Studios and the whole package.
Nice.
And we rented a place.
Nice.
I think we were there 2 weeks and tried to. Nice. I mean, I said I dipped out of the swim with the dolphins so I could go to Cape Canaveral because that was where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
Because I'd always wanted to go, and again, if I could only have seen a rocket take off, but
you didn't get to see a launch.
No. I've always been.
Rob is a retired air traffic controller. So when I say we lived in these different places, it was a different air traffic control. Mm-hmm. And so when we were here in Florida, we were in Miami and we were here in Tampa. That meant that he got to go and sit with the astronauts' family as the launches take off and watch them. I got to stay in a hotel on the beach and watch. I never got to go, but he did. He got to go.
You were still pretty close.
I was very close, close enough that everything shook. We still see launches all the time here
and we're
from
on
where
the
we
other
live.
side of the state, so you can still see them going up. It's pretty crazy.
We're on the complete opposite coast, but we can see it and we can hear the sonic boom when they re-enter. Because now, because of SpaceX, you know, they have rockets that can re-enter. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Watch them re-enter and land on a platform. You're like, what the? Really? And they do.
Like a sci-fi movie.
It is.
Oh, yeah. When I first saw it, I said, that can't be real. That's got to be
somebody reversed the film or something. Those sound taken on, right?
There's no way they can do that.
What we love are the 4 a.m. launches because we go out and the atmosphere is very cold at 4 a.m. And even when when it comes into the atmosphere, the gases that are giving off kind of like freeze in the sky and make all these crazy patterns as they're coming down. Yeah. And then that's when they're re-entering, and when they're taking off, you can see when they shoot out all the little satellites, you can see them coming off of the rocket. That's pretty cool too. You can actually count how many they set up there. So
we see twice last summer we saw the satellite thing, Musk's satellite thing going over.
Yeah.
As it sort of flies by. So what
Yeah.
the hell is that? Oh, it's that satellite thing. Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, and you would think living here, we've lived here in Florida now for 25, 26 years. You'd think we'd get used to it. Nope. We still love it.
Yeah.
We still get excited.
I'd be wanting to visit and see every single one. I'd be fascinated.
Well, if you ever get back over this way, give us a
Let
holler,
us know.
okay?
And definitely we'll have to go over to NASA and take a tour, because it's a wonderful tour and it's a fun place to see. It's amazing.
Sure. I'd love that.
Yeah, you can get to go on all kinds of rockets and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But you were able to do that at the Smithsonian too. You can.
Yeah, we could. There was a bit of that, and we got to sort of scratch the surface of it. But you sort of think, for someone like me, it was I've got to see more.
There's 18 museums there, and then there's the other NASA place just outside of DC that has all the
other Air and Space
Museum. The Enola Gay that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, and all that stuff.
All right.
Good reminders of history, that we need history.
That's right.
So we don't repeat it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was very much a pleasure to meet you.
Yes.
And we're going to move you over to the side now. Yep. And there we go. Safe and sound. I hope that didn't hurt too much. Want to remind everybody, Thursday nights, 9 o'clock, WDJYFM.com, 99.1 in Atlanta. Also Saturday episode rewind, 5:30 p.m. And next Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, right here, same place, same bat channel. And anything else that you want to say?
No, that's it.
You're all set?
I'm all set.
Then until next time.
That's all, folks. Good night.
Good night.
Live every Wednesday, your Voice of Indie hosts Beam Weeks and Stephen G's welcome authors, musicians, publishing industry pros, artists, and assorted creative guests for an exciting interactive hour. Call in during the show or post questions and comments on Twitter for responses in real time. Meet your favorite indie creators, learn inside tips, network, and promote your work. The link for each week's show is pinned on Twitter atop @VoiceOfIndie. And you can receive the link every Wednesday morning in your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter at freshinkgroup.com. Check out Voice of Indie every Wednesday on Blog Talk Radio and catch hundreds of episodes archived everywhere from our websites to our YouTube channel and Spotify.
Thank you for joining us here on Meet the Author. Make sure you stay up to date with our show by clicking like, follow, and share. And you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and more. See you next time.